At first glance, this airport might look simple. It's got a single runway laid across a valley. But this isn't just any valley. This is Leh's airport, located in the Himalayas at 10,000 feet, with mountains crowding the horizon, and the rules of normal flying start to bend. Leh sits at roughly 10,500 feet above the sea level, so high that the airport is literally carved into a mountain bowl. The high elevation means thin air, and as a result, the engines make less thrust, the wings make less lift, and the approach speeds are higher for the same indicated airspeed. Here's the unusual bit that you will never see at a big commercial airport. The landings are only permitted on runway 07, and the departures only on runway 25. This is written into the local airport regulations because the terrain on one end of the runway rises too fast for a safe takeoff, and the escape routes are all valley shaped, not straight out. Compare this to any other commercial airport. Both sides of the runway are usually used for landings and takeoffs. Leh is VFR only for civil traffic. VFR stands for Visual Flying Rules and operates on code HJ. HJ in this case refers to the hours during which there is adequate daylight. You have to fly a visual approach, judging the terrain around you by your eye. To make this workable, the airport adds an unusual rule. Within 25 miles of the airport, you must have visual contact with all the terrain below 25,000 feet. Leh is also one of those airports where the terrain really dictates everything. The airport does have navigation aids, but because it's surrounded by mountains, the signals don't reach that far. In fact, the VOR is only reliable out to about 58 miles. And even the radios that we use to talk to air traffic control can cut out around 40 miles in certain directions. The mountains create these radio shadows where you lose communication. So the pilots have to plan ahead, knowing exactly where those dead zones are and be ready for handoffs or position reports before the signal drops. The single runway at Leh, 2,700 meters by 45 meters, has a slope of about 1 degree and hence split threshold elevations. About 10,500 feet on runway 07 side and 10,800 feet on runway 25 side. This can change how you see and how the airplane feels. When landing on runway 07, because the runway is sloped upwards, it can feel as if the runway is coming onto you quicker. The high ground speed on short final means that you float longer if you're just a little faster than usual, in which case the braking and the reverse thrust become less effective. In fact, there is even a non-standard windsock on Gompa Hill to the right of the runway 07 approach, specifically to help crews judge winds in the valley. But still, there is always the risk that the wind at touchdown differs significantly due to the topography of the region. In fact, one of the major reasons that commercial flights arrive and depart in the morning is to mitigate against the much stronger winds that start afternoon onwards. Missed approaches and departures here are more complicated as well. Let's say that you abort a landing and want to go around. A simple climb straight ahead and circle in to land again won't work over here. For takeoffs, the departure sequence is also unique. The standard runway 25 departure is an immediate right turn to Point Nemo, then a climbing left turn to intercept airway Whiskey 39. If weather or winds prevent that immediately, then there's a visual contingency. You can climb on the runway heading to at least 12,000 feet, maintain a visual clearance, and then turn left after crossing the Gompa Hill to pick up the airway Whiskey 39. After this, the crew must remain visual with the terrain until passing 25,000 feet. But there's still one more curveball. Arrestor barrier huts sit on both runway 07 shoulders. These arrestors are usually used by the Air Force when they want to slow down their fighter jets after landing. More so, these are permanent, and the airport literally cautions crews during both landing and takeoff regarding these. If the altitude when landing is slightly lower, it's highly possible for the aircraft to hit these and cause damage. Leh is actually a joint civil and military field run by the Indian Air Force. Photography of any Indian Air Force assets here is not permitted as a result. The window shades here are usually kept closed when landing or taking off, mainly to prevent pictures being taken of any Indian Air Force or defense systems. With so many major and minor details to consider, the regulators in India treat Leh as a special operation that requires extra training. Hence, pilots have to undergo special training to be certified to fly into and out of Leh. In fact, when the DGCA recently reviewed airline simulator programs, Leh was one of the named airfields that must be covered by approved training profiles. If you're a pilot or a passenger that has flown into Leh and you have any peculiar stories from there, post that in the comments below for others to have a read.